Hey, Stuart here, and in this video I'm going to show you how to make ultra strong stovetop coffee. Okay, so I'm really pumped to show you how I do this. It's very simple actually, but what it means is that if you make it in this particular way, you'll find you probably don't need as much or as many coffees throughout the day. I think having dealt with so many hundreds of clients, I guess, over the years, one of the things that a lot of people tend to say is that they feel like they're drinking too much coffee, and it's not that coffee's necessarily bad for you, but obviously if you're having upwards of sort of 3 or 4 coffees a day, it might be something that you want to cut back on. Definitely I would say anything more than 3 cups of coffee a day is probably a bit excessive, and if you're looking to cut back on your coffee intake, I've got a really good method to show you. Now you've got the option of either doing it the way I do it, or if you just really like a really strong cup of coffee, I'm going to show you how to do that, exactly how to do that. It's quite simple. So I only have 1 coffee a day, and I find if I make my coffee in the way I'm going to show you, that I don't really need more coffee throughout the day personally. I just find that it gives me enough of a sustained buzz or mental energy that I don't really need to keep going and getting coffee all the time. So for those reasons, that's sort of how I've developed this way of making coffee. I personally really like strong coffee. If I go to a cafe, I'm the sort of person that would get a triple espresso, but again, that's because I'm probably only having 1 coffee a day. I tend to like to have it stronger in the morning, and then I don't need coffee throughout the rest of the day. So now I'm just going to run through exactly what you need in terms of equipment to make this ultra strong coffee. Okay, so the equipment you need is actually not a lot. You can see there's 4 items here. The main one though is obviously a stovetop coffee maker. Now this is a Bialetti model. Now I've got quite big hands, so that probably is not giving an accurate representation as to the size of this. Particularly when I hold this. This is actually a jumbo mug. No, it's an espresso cup. But this, I'm not sure what the model number is for this. As you can see, it's quite battered, and it's very well used. But this is perfect for me. You can get multiple sizes, for stovetop coffee makers. But this is the one I use. It certainly does the job. The canister, for the amount of coffee you put in there is just right for me. So we've got some coffee beans here. I use an organic coffee. The reason I do that is because coffee beans tend to be one of the most highly sprayed crops in the world. So they use a lot of pesticides to make coffee, and as such it can get into the beans. So I just think if you can get organic coffee, and it's not that hard to get organic coffee in Australia, so that's what I choose, particularly as I'm having coffee all the time. I think if you're doing things repetitively, particularly things like coffee, tea, if you can get organic, it's definitely the way to go, just to lower that toxic load. I use Grinders coffee, but you can use whatever coffee you want. Don't get caught up too much on that. This is more about the method than the actual coffee itself. Any fresh coffee will do for this method. I've got a grinder. Now you can freshly ground your beans, or you can just get pre-ground espresso. So one of the elements to making coffee really strong that I have worked out through trial and error is how fine the beans are actually ground is really important. So you just want to make sure if you're getting pre-ground beans that you are getting espresso. What that means really is that the finer the grind, I guess, or the finer you can ground the beans, the greater the surface area of coffee is going to be covered by the water, which generally should mean that you're getting more caffeine. Because if you have what I found is if you have a too coarse a grind, which I don't know if I'm even saying that probably, too coarse a ground, it's less surface area, and therefore you'll get less caffeine sort of being pulled through the coffee. So the finer the grind you can get, the better. That's why I use a grinder, because I use as you can see there, I use a little Breville grinder. They're not expensive, and I have it on fine and max. So I'll grind some coffee beans up, and you can sort of see the consistency. Okay, so our coffee beans have just been finely ground. So as you can see, it's quite a fine grind or ground, as I said. You want to get it as fine as you can. That's definitely what I would say in terms of making coffee really strong. That's one of the key elements. Nice and fine, very sort of powdery, or the most as powdery as you can get it. One of the good things about grinding coffee, as opposed to getting it pre-ground, I think, is the fact that you get all the nice oils, and I think it actually makes a better tasting coffee as well. But that being said, it doesn't probably make that much of a difference. But if you are drinking coffee all the time, I think you do notice when the coffee is finely ground as well. It gives a really nice smell too. Okay, so the next step is to put some water in the bottom of the coffee maker. I think the other element with this is, which is something that I picked up from a strength coach of all people who makes drip coffee, and I listened to him interviewed at one point, and he said he really likes having strong coffee, and the way he does it with drip coffee is he makes sure that the water he puts into the canister is ice cold. And the reason he does that is because it creates a lot more steam. So a lot more steam coming through the coffee means that, yeah, you're getting the coffee sitting in moisture, and the flavours being pulled out of the coffee for a lot longer. So the longer the water can steam before it starts to get really hot, you'll get all that steam sort of infusing through the coffee, which just adds to that, I guess, pulling more caffeine and flavour out of the coffee. Now, you fill it up. You're supposed to fill it up to the little seal in there. You can barely see that, apologies, but I put it just above the seal. I don't think it even matters. You could probably fill the whole thing up with water and I think it would still work. But anyway, make sure that water is as cold as you can get it. So really nice ice cold tap water if you can. And let's fill the little canister up with coffee as well. Okay, so an obvious question is, how much coffee do you put into the coffee canister? Now, that is how much I put in. I pack it in. As I said in the beginning of this video, the amount of coffee plays a role, definitely. I mean, you want to make sure that you're having, you're filling that canister up with coffee, but that really depends on the actual coffee or stovetop coffee machine that you're using. But as you can see, I fill that up pretty much to the top. It's packed in, and all those beans have been very finely ground. So that's how much I use. So use that as a guide. You want to fill it up to the top. Make sure all this sort of area around the edge, there's no coffee on that, and that just sort of keeps your coffee maker from the little rubber seal from eroding. So that's another tip as well. Just make sure this is all nice and clean before you screw the top on. But let's screw the top on now. Okay, so our coffee is ready to go. Now this is the third element that's really important to cover off. So I'll just put that down. So you got three elements to this. So the first element is making sure that the coffee grind is nice and fine. So you've got a really sort of powdery, almost an espresso consistency coffee. The other element is the cold water in the bottom of the canister. That's really important. The colder the water you can put in there, the better. And the third and final element is probably the most important element, and this is something that I have realized and developed over time as the way to make the coffee really good, is the time you actually have the coffee brewing. This is really important, and this is what you're going to have to work out a little bit for yourself, because everyone's stovetop is very different. Now, I've lived across multiple homes, and having used electric stovetops and gas stovetops, there's a big difference. And what I've noticed is, if you use a gas stove where there's actually a flame, it is almost impossible to brew that coffee slowly. So what I do, and I should just say this as well, this method is not the method to use if you need a coffee really quick. If you're like saying, you know, I'll get up in the morning and I just need to have my coffee straight away. This method takes about half an hour for the coffee to brew, and it's that length of time that actually makes the coffee really, really strong. but it also makes it really rich and nice in the stovetop coffee maker. I think when you make stovetop coffee on a gas stovetop, it will cook too quickly and almost burns the coffee. And the way to look at it logically is that, so the shorter the time the water from the bottom moves through the coffee, it goes through the coffee, absorbs the coffee, absorbs the caffeine in the coffee, and then pulls through into the top of the canister, you'll find that the shorter that time, the weaker the coffee is, which makes logical sense. So what I'm trying to do with this method, and if you try it as well, the idea is to have the coffee slowly brewed, which means that the water is pulling through slowly. So the reason we use the cold water is to get all the steam coming through the coffee first, which helps to pull a lot of the caffeine and the flavor out of the coffee. And then the water also moves through slowly as well. And what you also get, if you cook it too quick, you'll notice the smell is a bit weird. It smells almost burnt, and the coffee will be quite watery. It doesn't have a crema on the top, which is what you get with like an espresso. And this is the confusing thing. So I know you're probably sitting there going, yeah, but when I go to a cafe, I get my espresso like that. And that's part of the thing. That's what an espresso is. It's really quick. But it's the compression used in the espresso machine that's the different way of I guess, pulling the water or steam through the coffee. So this method is different. It creates a lot stronger cup of coffee though. I would say that it's definitely worth the wait. But as I said, it's not something you can sort of make in 5 minutes. If you're used to that sort of instant gratification, particularly with an espresso machine or something where bang, it's done immediately. This is a bit more of a ceremony, I like to think. So it's something once you get the hang of it though, and you get used to the method, and you're probably going to have to go through a little bit of trial and error in terms of working out the right level of heat for you. You definitely won't go back. If you like stovetop coffee, you're happy to make your coffee in this way, this is definitely the way to make it. So as I said, what happens if you've got a gas stovetop oven? So that is going to be problematic to make this coffee. I have yet to see or use a gas stovetop oven with a stovetop coffee maker and have it not make the coffee too quick. It's just too hot. So we're trying to get a warm plate that's not too hot on a very, very low setting, and that will allow the coffee to be sort of brewed nice and slowly. Now what I use is this. Don't ask me what it's called, but I bought this a place in Melbourne called Chef's Hat. As I said, I have no idea what it is called. Basically, this sits on top of your stovetop and over one of the gas heads. I use the smallest gas head on the stovetop on the lowest setting, so that'll give you some idea about how low the heat is for this. It's a very low heat, and this makes the heat even lower. So this is like I think it's used for slow cooking, but it's like a slow cooking plate that you put over a gas stovetop head. So that's what I use. It takes the heat out of it, and then I use it on the lower setting. Now if you want to take this really seriously, as I clearly do, which is a bit embarrassing actually, but I actually have this as well. So I actually have a plate which is a Canbrook plate. It's like a camping hot plate basically. Not expensive, picked them up for sort of 20 bucks. But this is brilliant because I can get the heat down really, really low. Now, whether you're using this or using the tricky little plate on top of the oven, the aim of this in terms of time is about 30 minutes. So it should take about 30 minutes to brew. Shouldn't take much longer than that, but definitely anything under 15, it hasn't been long enough and you've cooked it too quickly, or you've brewed it too quickly, I should say. Let's jump into it. I've been talking long enough. Let's actually brew this coffee so you can see what it looks like. Our coffee is ready. Now, that is what it should look like. We've got a nice creme creamer around the top. So what you find is if you brew the coffee too quickly using the stovetop without sort of keeping the heat nice and low, it won't look like that. It'll look very watery, and it'll start spitting out and making all sorts of hissing noises. Now that's taken about 30 minutes to actually pull all that water from the bottom through to the top. And as a result, you can see how dark that coffee is. It smells absolutely magnificent. But that's as close as you can get to a really nicely pulled espresso on an espresso machine in a cafe on a stovetop coffee maker. But the thing with this is it's a hell of a lot stronger than an espresso coffee. Now, as I said, this is one way you can have it, which is, you know, you can have it as a black coffee. You can add milk in there as well if you like, or alternatively, if you want to try how I actually make it, which I either have it black or I will have it with butter and MCT oil. So if you'd like to see how I make that, which is basically something called bulletproof coffee, it's not an invention by me. If you'd like to see how I make that, just keep watching this video. Otherwise, you can pour your stovetop coffee and have it black, or add some milk to it, and away you go. Okay, so you want to know how to make bulletproof coffee. As I said, this is not my invention, but this is something I discovered about 5 or 6 years ago, and it absolutely revolutionized the way that I drink coffee. I only drink coffee like this now. And the reason is, as I said in the beginning of the video, I have 1 coffee a day, and I find if I make the coffee like this, it gives me all this sustained sort of mental clarity and energy, and it's just brilliant. And I love the taste of it as well. I find if I have coffee, you know, if I just had an espresso, if I had just got the coffee and made an espresso, black coffee, it gives you a really strong kick initially, and then you tend to crash. And I actually find that it's the crash that keeps people having more coffee. So if you can avoid that crash and have more of an elongated, I guess, energy or buzz or whatever you want to call it, you'll actually drink less coffee. So I've had a lot of clients start drinking their coffee like this and really reduce their coffee intake if that's what you want to do. If you're a coffee connoisseur and you love your coffee, well, have it for different reasons, but at least try it like this. I mean, as I said, as soon as I had it like this, it was a massive game changer for me. So I'm going to show you how to make it. It's called bulletproof coffee. It's not my invention, but this is how I make it anyway. You will need a blender, MCT oil, which you can buy from the supermarket, which is about $8 a bottle, which is a pure form of coconut oil. It's medium chain triglycerides, which is a form of branched chain fatty acids that are converted in the liver into energy. So it goes straight through the liver and is converted into fuel. Because I eat low carb, I tend to have higher fat in my diet, and this is like brain fuel. If you need to write, or you need to think clearly, or concentrate, or study, or whatever, have this coffee with this. It's incredible. It's like brain fuel. I'm not sure why it affects your brain chemistry so much, but your ability to concentrate, your overall mood, your ability to absorb information as well is very, very heightened with the butter as well. So basically what the fats do, and these are just 2 forms of fat, aren't they? The butter gives it a really nice flavor, but what it does do is it slows down the absorption of the caffeine, and you get more of this sort of drip feed caffeine hit, as opposed to this massive bolus dose, which is what you get with espresso. And that's what fats really do. They slow down the absorption of things, and that's why fats are so important. Yeah, they're really critical. They slow down the absorption of what you're eating, but particularly with things like insulin and insulin health, the higher the fat content of the meal, the lower the glycemic load of the meal. So if you up your fats, you'll find inadvertently that you're lowering that insulin response, which is really, really important if you are trying to maintain optimal body composition. And as I said, I'm on the lower carb side of things in terms of the way I eat, so I tend to have sort of high protein, higher fat in the morning, and then I'll tend to have my carbs later in the day. But I'll stop carrying on here. This coffee's getting cold, so let's make a bulletproof coffee so you can see what I mean. So I use a NutriBullet. You can use any blender though. Obviously not a juicer. You don't want to juice it. But you can see there, the coffee, I've poured the coffee into the cup. I've added a knob of butter in there too, which you can see is melting. And how much MCT oil really is up to you, but you don't want too much. You just need a little dribble of it. That's about right. And then blend that up. So I'll blend that up now. Blend it. Have a look at that. You can see that it looks like a Guinness at the bottom. But yeah, it makes it really creamy and delicious. So I'll just pour that out. And there we have a bulletproof coffee. Now, you might be thinking, God, why would you put oil and butter into your coffee? But the taste is actually really, really nice. It's nice and sort of smooth, but you'll be drinking it, I guess, for the nootropic or cognitive effects that it gives you, I believe anyway. Once you start drinking it like this, it'll mean you drink less coffee, but it just gives you a completely different buzz, particularly if you make it really strong like we have done with that stovetop method, with the really slow brew. So there you have it. Ultra strong stovetop coffee. Now, you don't have to do a bulletproof coffee like I have, but that method, those three elements, remember the nice fine grind or ground, I'll have to look that up after I get off. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but a nice fine grind, and then you want to make sure the water in the base of the stovetop coffee maker is really, really cold. The colder the better. And then you want to make sure you brew it for a long time. So 30 minutes is about right. If you've got an electric stovetop, I'd say you'd be able to get the temperature down low enough to actually do it on an electric one. If you don't, like I do, which I've got a gas stovetop, you might need to get one of those plates. You can get them at any kitchen wholesale place will have it. It's like a slow cooker plate, I think that's what it's called, but it just brings the heat of it down. The people that work there, I'm sure, will be able to point you in the right direction. Otherwise, you can buy one of those camping hot plates like I have. So there's a few ways to do it. You don't need a lot of equipment. But I think once you start having your coffee like this, you'll probably never go back to your $4.50 lattes. At least I don't anyway, and I only have one coffee a day. So hopefully you enjoy that. I'm going to have my coffee now, and I'd love to get your feedback on how you found the process of making it, but also how you found the outcome at the end. Thanks guys, enjoy, take care.